Look, it's come up 2 or 3 times, so I'm going to have to make a comment on it. I was hoping not to, but I mean, global supply chains are precisely that, and capital goes to where the supply chain is most efficient. And one of the key elements, as we all know, all of us that have worked in the area, is that if you're dealing with highly flexible capital environments in a global supply chain, at the sharp end of the spear will be labour costs for manufacturing. And that usually the major investments will be in countries where if there is not a transparent labour regime, you used the term wage slavery a couple of times, I think, in your question that you were... Yeah. Modern slavery, yeah. Modern slavery, as opposed to traditional good old-fashioned slavery. The issue for me is that, and it does come to transparency as well, that I think the real ethical question for people working in supply chains, if they have a global purview, is that what do you do if 80% of your supply chain is transparent, open, manageable and terrific, and 20% lives in that culture of not transparent, murky, modern slavery? Do you have any obligation to make any commentary about that as a supply chain manager? Or is it your job just to make the supply chain as efficient as possible? And I might say, by the way, it's not an academic thing for me. My middle son has just been made a global supply chain manager for a huge beef export company out of Australia, a big pastoral company. And he's doing a lot of work in China, a lot of work in South Korea, a lot of work in Japan. And the question of do you do live cattle and slaughter them somewhere else where it's cheaper, or do you make abattoirs in Australia more automated and keep the labour costs down through automation, is a constant day-to-day question he's asked by his board. So it's not like it's a not to be discussed topic. It's discussed every day in companies. The problem is, I think sometimes the people in supply chain that are asked to make the decisions are not the decision makers about where the investment goes, and they have to make the call as to whether they are then, if you like, the participants in the process, or do they make some commentary about the process. And by the way, I think that's not a question for us. I think it's a question for the people who are in that situation, either in this room or somewhere else. And I'm wondering, coming back to your business ethics question right up front, as to whether that will remain one of the great unspoken questions. What's the old expression, the sin that shall not bear its name or shall not be named, or something like that, as to how long we put up with it before finally someone says enough?
Can I add something to that? I come from Nottingham. In Nottingham, we practice teaching and learning in a different way. Certain suggestions what have been given by you is already practiced, and we are doing dissertation in collaboration with the local businesses. And local businesses, during the induction day, they come and say what are the topics to be considered, and then dissertation will be awarded. It's not one-off practice, it's every semester it's happening. So that means we know what is expected, what are the skill sets expected from the local businesses. Then we include them in our teaching and learning as well. And we don't take too much of time to change the actually we don't change the diet of the learning set. However, we are changing the applications of that. So like every business, its turnaround time is 72 hours for the contract, the same way for us, and we don't take much of the time. Professor Chris Voss is here. He might be knowing that this is happening in every other university in UK. If they have to be in the top 20 or 30, they have to do these changes. And modern slavery is also included in the recent teaching and learning. And every company has got different names for the modern slavery. Ethics is different, terminology is different, but the concept is the same. So we are changing every year what is expected and what we are teaching. So it's not difficult to achieve. It may be difficult at the beginning. Once we are practicing it, it is happening. So we academics can make the things happen. It's not complicated. Okay, thank you.
Other questions?
Yeah. Oh.
There's a lady behind you, I think, who's got her. How about Viken? Did you have your hand up, didn't you? No? Oh, okay.
I have a question for each of you, as a matter of fact. For you guys who are in industry.
Can you make it louder, please?
You have to use.
For you guys who are in industry, are you doing a good job? Are you competitive? If you are, we are doing a good job. No question about it. No, the reason I'm asking you, your own company, because when it comes to your own company, you answer it differently. To your own university, is it a good university? Are you guys educating competitively to a point that when the students they go out, they can help the industry or not?
So, yes, I think I'm doing a great job, and probably Trevor is as well. A lot of clients keep coming back and asking for more help, so thanks for that. It makes me feel good, actually. I think in terms of like from my education and what I picked up, the biggest piece is I realised that there's a lot of people dedicating their life to a certain field in supply chain, and there's a lot of resources available. People are focused on doing a thesis on this and that and the other thing, and there's thousands of academics everywhere. And if you can tap into that as a resource pool and bring it back to industry, because the industry is so stuck in their bubble and everyone's operations for my company only. So they're so micro, they don't actually understand that there's so much resources available, that people are dedicated and focused on so much insightful content that can actually be taken back, sort of translated to the language of the business and then sold internally. I think that's probably the key, is bridging that gap between education and sort of industry. But the students need to be taught how to do that. I think that's the key.
Yeah, I think I agree with Tim. We're both doing a good job. Yeah, we are remaining competitive in a very competitive environment, and no doubt it's through the talent that whether our people that build our robots in Germany or equipment in the US, whatever it be, obviously some very talented people coming through the system. And I think, there's, it might be getting a bit off track, I've seen in careers that there's generally the specialist. They may be the engineer, or they may be the quality person, and they've a lot of deep study in that area. Then you come across a lot of these generalists, and they might be a managing director or plant manager or whatever. And it's funny, I sort of reflect on the education process that I undertook versus what you might see some of the specialists. And it might be getting to the point that was made before, is how does education continue throughout your life? And having done my trade and a lot of early study, I then went back and did engineering. And then I had 2 years off. Then I went back and did a marketing degree. And so I didn't really finish study until I was 38, 39, and I haven't gone back. But the thing was, it helped me, because it changed and I was willing to do a lot of part-time study, it helped me adapt to the environment, if that makes sense. So, having the education systems now for people, it might just need to be a bit more flexible, a bit more, instantaneous as you go through your career, if that makes sense.
Is my university doing a good job? Let me think, who's here? There's 1, 2, 3. It's doing a great job. Yes, Norma? Fantastic job. I'm new to universities. That's why I can say what I say. It's because I've got absolutely no roots or future career prospects in them. I see 3 things when I look at a university. One is I see the brand called the university. And I've learned to distinguish the brand from what is actually the collegiate culture that lives within the university, within different faculties and departments. And a university as a brand in Australia is driven by the funding models set by the federal government. So essentially what kind of university you're going to get in Australia will be driven largely by the way the university and its programs are funded. You fund more for PhDs, you do more PhDs. So the first question is, we're doing a good job within the funding models that we have been given. ask me the next question, is the funding model right? And you get a different answer, in my opinion, from an industry perspective. Second group is the colleagues that I've had the great good fortune to work with. And with almost no exception, I have been staggered by the capacity of people who are career academics under the most amazing duress to constantly deliver quality outcomes for their students as teachers and as researchers. It is just amazing. In Australia, the pressure on academics now, as opposed to a generation ago, and they still perform. By and large, they still perform. And I would collapse under the teaching load that some of my colleagues have got at university, and they show up with a smile on their face. The third thing about are we doing a good job is I still do not believe we're doing a good job in connecting with industry. And you made the comment, if we're doing a good job and you're doing a good job, we all win. Yeah, I get that. I get that. But the structural impediments that I see everywhere I turn in my university, which is changing but slowly, means that you end up, by exception, doing good work with industry as opposed to being, that's the way things are done around here. There are some universities that are better at it. Melbourne's very good at it, for example, than industry engagement. Monash is very good at it. UNSW is very good at it. There are clusters of universities that do well. And finally, by the way, for those who aren't familiar with the Australian system, we actually did have a really good university system till a politician called Richard Dawkins got hold of it and decided to turn all the colleges of advanced education into universities back in the 90s. We doubled the number of universities in Australia for a population worth about half the size, and we're still trying to get back to the concept of vocational and technical worth in education as opposed to just getting a degree. In my opinion.
You guys changed your mind. I appreciate that. You started with broken. Now you are talking about improvement, which I strongly agree with.
These guys love the university.
Yeah. They supported you, as a matter of fact. With broken education. Education is not broken. We really need improvement. I strongly agree.
So what I was wondering is whether in the future, if automatization is one of the trends, and also considering that maybe in the future different transactions will be made through blockchain technologies, and also adding to that fact that probably big data systems will make most of the decisions. Where's the place for future supply chain managers? Because, I mean, I'm thinking about designing my supply chains management course for next year, and also thinking about the different skills that you mentioned before in that document. Maybe we will be educating people to be supply chain builders or designers more than supply chain managers, because are they going to be able to make decisions for the supply chain? So decisions will be made by the big systems. That's really a concern for me, because sometimes in the team of professors at my university, we're trying to, you know, we don't know where to focus exactly when we design these kind of courses in supply chain management. Should we do it from the point of view of technology? So we are educating technology implementers. I'd really like to know your point of view about that. It would be great help for me. Thank you.
So I won't try to convince you that I'm an expert in blockchain, because I have no idea. I don't even understand how it works, right? And I don't think most people do. And I think if you push that to one side, there's emerging technologies and things are happening. I wouldn't throw all your eggs in one basket, because I think the masses of the population need to trust and understand how these systems are going to work before they actually get sort of tick the box and go all in. So let's put that to one side for a moment. Like 10%, if you like, the future emerging technologies for a supply chain manager of the future. The thing that I think about, and what I learned at Procter & Gamble, was a supply chain manager needs to have two sides to their brain, and they typically tend to only be on one side, which is the science side, if you like. The art side, which is the marketing, the commercials, the sales, how the actually business sells its products to the CEO and what have you. As supply chain managers start rising in awareness and they start getting a seat at the big table, they're probably going to need to understand how to actually talk and influence a sales executive, a marketing executive, and the CEO, because ultimately, you know, if it's a listed company, it's going to be connected to a market. It's got to sell a product. It's got to hit its numbers, right? So a supply chain manager needs to understand that commercial element as well as their operations sort of technical piece. In terms of automation and how that's going to start, removing a lot of the day-to-day tasks, if you like, it will happen. But I think it has to be designed in a way that there's still pillars of intervention where the data, again, if the data input is bad, they're going to get garbage out and they're going to make the wrong decision. It's going to impact the rest of the business. So it's how does a system, if you like, that is automated and connected have the right pillars at the right moment to ensure that the data is sort of audited, if you like, and that decision is reflected and made correctly. But you're right, they will change. But I don't think so much designers, because if you think about a designer, typically you'll design your sort of supply network in one hit. So if, whether it's a merger acquisition or the business changes direction, it happens and it's usually for a sort of 5 to 10 year window, and then it happens again. It's probably going to, I don't know what you call it, but it's definitely not going to be a supply chain manager. It'll be something a little bit different. Maybe it's a supply chain, I don't know. I'll think about it. If I've come up with something, I'll let you know.
It's a really good point, Tim. Look, I think if we got into the detail, and forgive me if I keep going in detail, but I am a true supply chain factory person, but if you talk about the automation that you see in the plant, so some of our large ovens, 120 metres long, producing, 6 tonne an hour, they've got a baker on them. Yes, we're looking at technology that is looping back and predicting to change those big monster ovens as they're baking, and one day there won't be a baker on there. It won't be in my time, but that will happen. 400 workforce will probably go to 200. But as a supply chain manager, I think sometimes we get lost in, they're not there just for the technology, they're there for the people. So at the end of the day, those 200 people or 50 people that they'll be leading, it's not just the technology skill they need, but the people skill, which also comes out of universities. It's, the mindset is, I totally agree, it's a different, I talked about, we're not looking for forklift drivers now, we're looking for people that operate guided forklifts from a computer, and they're running around your factory with no people on them. It's a totally different mindset, but I don't think we'll ever get away from the fact that as you go up the ladder as supply chain leader, what are you truly responsible for, I think, is the people.
I feel your pain about trying to design a course or a program. I really do. It's everything I've been saying for the last half hour, that by the time you get your head around what it should look like, it's already moved on. Supply chain enabler, supply chain facilitator, take your pick, and by the time we get it into the culture, we'll be moved on to the next expression, which is why I'm steering away from the notion of qualifications and role descriptors and starting to think about skills clusters and micro-credentials and what are the lifelong learning aspects of what you pick up and get recognition for. And if you ask me from a university perspective, my challenge to my university is, are you ready to recognise pathways to recognition that do not fit and conform to the normal curriculum? Because if universities do that, that's my 5th structural change. If universities do that, I think there's a fair chance we'll work well with industry, instead of trying to make people go through that hoop of let's design a new curriculum. But as you know as well as I do, university structures are not designed to do that, and it's really hard. And it's hard for the people who are in charge of the universities as well as for those that teach in them. But if we are to improve the system that is broken down, if not broken, then my view is we have to have a go. And by the way, that's at the level at which academics, like the people in this room, can do it. If you get a chance to talk about what's the program for next year or the year after, why not introduce some innovative notions on how you might do stuff and have a bit of a fight over it? Might be worthwhile.
Maybe one
Question?
question? Yeah.
No, he thinks he's got to speak, so he's
Just one point on the issue on having a profession. I think you mentioned there was only 2 professions. You mentioned the medical and the legal. I'd like to take an example of the engineering profession, and I think the role that I think we need to play in advising education on what needs to be taught. I think what you said around the body of knowledge, not having a supply chain profession is really key, and having a process whereby the people who are in the industry, they're the ones that determine what the body of knowledge is, and they're the ones that then go to the university and say, well, this is the things that you need to teach. And it's an ongoing process. I know in the engineering profession, that's what happens. You know, for the Institute of Engineers, they constantly review their body of knowledge, and there's a constant interaction. The problem is when you deal in business, whether it's supply chain or quality, there is no quality profession or supply chain profession which is strong enough that can then turn around and say, please employ people with this university because they meet the body of knowledge. So we need to create a process. We need to, you know, bring in those experts and say, right, we are the industry, you are the teachers, we need to work together to make sure that that happens. So I think it's really all up to us to create that profession and then move forward and make sure that all these problems are met.
Thank you. So I think that's an excellent place to end as a challenge to all of us in terms of it is actually up to us to become a profession, I guess, is the challenge that we have been set.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Tava, and the three panelists. I would like to first thank Tava for coming up and saying, you know, the only New Zealander among all the Aussies, so I think that's been very, very brave of you to do that, and thank you for wielding the whip and getting them together, so thank you very much, Tava.
Thank you.
And then the next one I want to mention then would be Tim. Tim, I didn't catch all your presentation, and I'm sad about that, but I have other things which should not have got in the way. But whatever I saw, it was really very, very encouraging. I think the system side, the visibility side, that's very encouraging. What I did get out of it, though, was that you were really stressing the collaboration between the industry and the academics. So I think that in itself is pretty good. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, and the third one is Trevor. Trevor, let me see. You know, again, sharing of your insights and your experience. Thank you for coming in on a day which you didn't feel so good. Very, very impressed with the driverless vehicles and guided automation. I would love to get my students to go into your plant site, and I don't know whether we can allow that to happen. One thing I'm very disappointed, though, Trevor, very disappointed. Yes, there's no Tim Tams. And I don't know whether those who are not from this country know about Tim Tams, but I know every time I go to the US, I have this large order, so I have to bring 2 suitcases. One is full of Tim Tams. Thank you. And so the last one is Daryl. Daryl. What can I say, Daryl? Yes. 3 things. Daryl is good in this. You've taught us to talk about points. So 3 things. First one, down to earth. Very enjoyable that way. Second one, you should have brought a spoon so you could stir it. And the third one, always good stuff. I really enjoy listening to you each time. Thank you, Daryl. And thank you for coming to this plenary panel. You know there is another one this afternoon, and that's when we draw the lucky draw. So I'm sure some of you would really like what we have there. So enjoy your lunch. There is a session, some parallel sessions after this. And then the plenary, do not forget, wharf number what?